Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore what life was like 4,000 years ago, how people lived, what they did, and much more. But before you get lost in the video, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. 4,000 years ago, long before the world had printing presses, typewriters, or the internet, human beings were already struggling with the same questions we face today. How do we record, organize, and preserve information? In the heart of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, people found their answer in the simplest of things: clay. The people of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria used moist clay tablets as their notebooks, their ledgers, and their official records. Into the wet surface of clay, they pressed wedge-shaped marks with a sharpened reed, creating what we now call cuneiform writing. This was not literature at first, not poetry or storytelling, but something much more practical: numbers, lists, inventories, and taxes. Imagine a farmer, 4,000 years ago, bringing his barley harvest to the temple granary. A scribe sits nearby with a pile of soft clay tablets. The farmer unloads sacks of grain, and for each sack, the farmer unloads sacks of grain. And scribe makes small marks with his reed stylus, pressing carefully to avoid mistakes. Once finished, the tablet is dried in the sun or baked in a kiln, turning into a permanent record of how much grain was delivered. For the farmer, this was not just a simple receipt. It was proof of his contribution to society, to his ruler, and to the gods. Everyday life in Mesopotamia revolved around such transactions. Crops were planted and harvested according to the cycles of the rivers. Livestock, sheep, goats, and cattle were counted and assigned value. Workers were paid not in coins, which had not yet been invented, but in rations of grain, oil, or beer. And every bit of this economic life had to be written down, because without records, disputes would arise, resources would be lost, and rulers would lose control. The invention of writing in Mesopotamia was therefore not born from poetry, but from paperwork. The earliest tablets we have discovered are full of numbers. Accounts and signs representing commodities. To us, they may look boring. Lists of sheep, jars of oil, bricks for construction. But for the people of that world, they were the heartbeat of civilization. Without these clay records, there would have been chaos. Taxes were another central aspect of life. Rulers demanded contributions from farmers, traders, and craftsmen. Sometimes this tax was a portion of the harvest, sometimes livestock, sometimes labor itself. Workers might be required to build canals, temples, or city walls as part of their obligation, and again scribes were there writing down every detail on clay tablets: who gave what, who owed more, who was exempt, and who had failed to meet his duty. The temple and the palace became centers of record-keeping, each with vast archives of tablets stacked in rooms like the filing cabinets of antiquity. Scribes were highly respected because only they could read and write cuneiform, a skill that took years of training. Young boys who entered scribal schools would spend hours every day pressing marks into clay, copying signs, memorizing lists, and practicing calculations. They learned not just language, but also mathematics and accounting, because the main role of a scribe was to ensure the smooth functioning of the economy. Without them, the king could not rule effectively. The daily routine of these scribes was repetitive, even tedious. They recorded the same things again and again: barley rations for workers, counts of oxen for plowing, deliveries of fish to the market, payments of silver to merchants. And yet, this monotony was the very backbone of civilization. Through such careful records, temples could feed the poor, armies could be supplied, and trade could flourish across the region. Mesopotamian society was highly stratified. At the top stood the king, believed to rule by divine favor. Below him were priests, scribes, merchants, and craftsmen. Farmers and laborers formed the majority of the population, working the fields, tending animals, and building infrastructure. Slaves, often prisoners of war, worked under harsh conditions. But across all these classes, record-keeping tied people together. Whether you were a wealthy merchant trading tin and textiles or a poor farmer giving a portion of your harvest, your obligations were written in clay. What is fascinating is how advanced this system became. Some tablets included not only numbers but also seals impressed with intricate designs, serving as signatures or proof of authenticity. Others contained detailed contracts specifying agreements between parties, marriage contracts, sales of land, or loans of silver. Imagine a Mesopotamian merchant lending grain to another trader, with a tablet recording when repayment was due. That tablet, once baked, became legally binding, just like a contract today. Even disputes were settled with reference to these clay records. Judges in ancient courts would examine the tablets to determine who was in the right. In many ways, Mesopotamia gave birth not only to writing, but also to bureaucracy, law, and finance. Their obsession with record-keeping ensured stability, but it also created layers of administration that could feel suffocating. Farmers may have grumbled as they delivered taxes. Traders may have resented scribes checking their goods. But no one could escape the clay tablet, for it was the ultimate authority. Day after day, year after day, the process continued. Planting, harvesting, counting, recording, taxing, redistributing. It was a cycle as predictable as the flooding of the rivers, and all of it was captured in rows of wedge-shaped marks on humble clay tablets. When we look at these tablets today in museums, they may seem dull compared to golden treasures or towering statues. Yet they are, in many ways, more important. They speak directly to the lives of ordinary people, to their work, their struggles, and their interactions with power. They remind us that civilization is built not on dramatic moments, but on countless small acts of organization. And perhaps in that sense, Mesopotamian life was not so different from ours. We too live in a world of records, tax forms, bank statements, digital databases. Our medium has changed from clay to paper to computer screens, but the impulse is the same: to preserve information, to make society function, to impose order on the chaos of human activity. If someone from ancient Mesopotamia could see us today, they might be amazed at our technology, but they would certainly recognize the logic behind it. They would see that we are still writing, still counting, still keeping track. 4,000 years may have passed, but the clay tablet lives on, in every spreadsheet, every receipt, every database that defines modern life. The story of those early scribes is the story of us all, the endless struggle to record, remember, and manage the flow of human existence. And as you lie in bed tonight, thinking of those farmers and scribes pressing reeds into clay by the dim light of oil lamps, remember this: civilization was built not by kings or warriors alone, but by the quiet, repetitive work of record keepers, whose dusty tablets carried the weight of an entire world. 4,000 years ago, Mesopotamia was not just the land of rivers and clay tablets. It was also a hub of trade and commerce, bustling with merchants, artisans, and traders. The cities of Ur, Uruk, and Babylon were crowded marketplaces where barley, wool, silver, and pottery changed hands daily. Merchants traveled great distances, sometimes on foot, sometimes with donkeys or ox-driven carts, carrying goods across deserts and along rivers. Trade was essential because Mesopotamia, despite its fertile lands, lacked certain resources such as timber, stone, and metals. Traders would negotiate deals, often haggling over weight and quality, while scribes recorded each transaction on clay tablets. These merchants were skilled negotiators understanding the value of commodities, timing, and the risks of travel. Caravans faced dangers, bandits, floods, and harsh terrain, but successful merchants brought wealth and prestige to their families. Markets were not only places of commerce but also social hubs. People exchanged news, stories, and gossip alongside goods. Temples and palaces regulated trade, ensuring that taxes were collected, weights were standardized, and contracts were enforced. Each deal was a carefully written record. Clay tablets from the era show contracts for loans, purchases, and even complex multi-party agreements, reflecting a surprisingly sophisticated economy. Everyday life for merchants was a balance between risk and reward. Some dealt only locally, selling their goods within city walls. Others traveled hundreds of miles to trade with distant lands, exchanging textiles for precious metals or grain for timber. They needed literacy, numeracy, and the ability to calculate profits and losses. The scribe remained a crucial figure in these transactions, translating spoken agreements into permanent records. The economy of Mesopotamia also relied heavily on the river system. Boats transported bulk goods like grain, dates, and reeds down the Tigris and Euphrates. Docks were busy with loading and unloading, while merchants negotiated tariffs and payments. Beyond material trade, knowledge and culture were also exchanged. Stories, religious practices, and technological innovations traveled along trade routes, spreading ideas across regions. In this environment, Mesopotamian society thrived, combining agriculture, commerce, and administration into a complex civilization. Life was challenging. Traders faced the uncertainties of weather, theft, and political changes, but their diligence laid the groundwork for what we now recognize as organized economies. Taxes and record-keeping continued to play a central role, even for merchants. Every transaction, no matter how small, had to be documented. Payments to the temple or palace were carefully calculated, ensuring that rulers and priests could maintain infrastructure, fund construction projects, and support armies. Merchants who failed to keep proper accounts risked penalties or loss of reputation, which could ruin business. Interestingly, Mesopotamian trade was not only about survival, but also ambition. Successful merchants could rise in social status, gain influence in city councils, and secure advantageous marriages. Their families could benefit from accumulated wealth, and some even became patrons of temples, commissioning statues, inscriptions, and donations that would last for millennia. The story of Mesopotamian merchants shows us that civilization is not built only by kings and scribes, but also by those willing to take risks, negotiate, and innovate within the system. They created networks of commerce, connected cities, and enabled cultural exchange. Their legacy survives not only in the clay tablets recording their deals, but also in the very concept of trade, markets, and the written contract, which remains central to modern economies. As we reflect on this era, it becomes clear that the mundane acts of buying, selling, and recording were the invisible engines driving civilization forward. Just as today, when commerce underpins every aspect of society, in Mesopotamia, the meticulous attention to detail, record-keeping, and trade ensured survival, growth, and the gradual emergence of cities, law, and culture.